Hi, my name is Lisa Phipps and I live on the Oxfordshire-Northamptonshire border. I'm going to be talking about recording the biodiversity around us, why it's important, how it helps, and how you can get involved in this. It's really important that I state right from the start that I'm no expert. I'm very much a novice in all species and simply have got involved in biodiversity recording locally and wanted to share the research and the information that we found to help other people to be able to contribute to this valuable topic. So Wild Oxfordshire explained perfectly clearly the importance of biodiversity data. So I'm simply going to read to you what they say about it on their website to share that with you. Wildlife conservation relies on data, knowing where particular species are, where they have been lost and where they might potentially be at risk, informs efforts to protect them from impacts of development, changing land use and habitat loss. This information can also help identify potential hotspots where species might thrive in future, where efforts to restore and enhance habitat should be focused, or where species reintroduction programmes may have the most chance of success. Local environmental record centres, LERCs, are hubs for this information, holding records collected by local wildlife groups, naturalists, ecologists and researchers, and passing them on to those that need them. To ensure local decisions about planning and development, sustainable land management, research and conservation are driven by robust data, these record centres need your help. Everyone can play a part in the submitting wildlife observations to local environmental record centres. This is so that they appear on the official record that is consulted by planning authorities and used by other parties to track changes in distribution and abundance. So the QR code is for TVERC, which is our local environmental record centre here in Oxfordshire. But if you're not in Oxfordshire, then you will have your own record centre and you should obviously be looking at their website. It is important to mention at this early stage that whatever you're doing and however you are getting involved, it's really important that you that you make sure that the records that you're creating are ending up with the with your local record centre. So a lot of the information that I will talk about may be specific to Oxfordshire, and as I'm on the border, I also do understand how Northamptonshire Record Centre works too. So just a word then on the National Biodiversity Network Atlas. So the National Biodiversity Network Atlas is an online tool that's looking to basically bring together all of the different information from across the whole of the UK. So the local environmental record centres were all set up completely independently in their own counties. Some record centres cover more than one county. Some have more staff. Some are very tiny. They're all very different, and because they've established separately and obviously a long time ago, it does mean that they do operate in very different ways. So that isn't to say that one is better than another. They're just different. So it is really important that you understand how your record centre operate, where they're pulling records from, and how you can best contribute. So the National Biodiversity Network Atlas is aiming to be a centralisation of all of the records across the UK. It is quite a new initiative, so it is evolving, but it is a great tool where you can just go and look at records in your area. So why then is it important to record? So there's lots of reasons, and everyone will have their different motivations of why they individually want to get involved and what aspects that they want to get involved with. So one of the things is that it makes sure that there's no seasonal species overlooked. So as you will know, whatever your species is that you're interested in, but most species have seasonal species. So species that you won't see at one time of the year, but you will see at another time of the year. So an example where I live is, at the moment, if I go outside, I will see probably an abundance of butterflies and bees, etc. But I wouldn't expect to see any bluebells. And that doesn't mean that there's no bluebells there. It just means that it's the wrong time of year for them. Earlier in the year, when I was going outside and seeing bluebells, I wasn't seeing butterflies or bees. And again, it's just because it wasn't at the right time of year for them. So by contributing to the biodiversity data means that for your area, the Record Centre can capture a complete 12-month fully seasonal picture of what is actually present in your area. So it means that means as well there's less reliance on snapshot ecology studies. So they may be done by conservation groups, or perhaps by a developer for planning. So whatever the purpose, the ecology study is going to be at a specific time, and it's only going to see what's there, what's present at the time of the study. So by contributing ongoing means that there's less reliance on the snapshot. So it then means that just if something isn't present there, it is recorded in the records. And of course, when assessing any development proposals, the planners will look for the local environmental record centre for the records that are available, so that they can understand what species might need any mitigation or any special sort of like treatment or conditions imposed for the development. And this is just to ensure that there's no harm done to nature by development. So by being involved, it means that as many species as possible are going to be documented in an official place. So if the more people that get involved, some people will have specific species that they're interested in. Some people may want to take a more general approach. But if you have, for example, somebody that's very, very interested in bumblebees, somebody else that's very interested in trees, and they're both contributing, then overall both of those species are going to be well recorded. So the more people that are getting involved, then the more species are going to be covered. The records will be recorded for the future. So whatever you're recording now and however you're contributing, those records will be there for the future. So of course, some species change, species reduce, unfortunately, and it is important for conservationists to know where species once did thrive, to be able to understand these changes and these trends. But record centres keep their records for forever. So there's no we just, after 5 years, we dump all the data. Once that record is recorded with the record centre, that is going to be recorded for all time. So perhaps in 100 years' time, ecologists will be making use of the information that we recorded today, as well as it being a valuable contribution for the world that we're living in today. So who's to say in the future something that's really common today may be really rare in the future, and so it just ensures that that it's all there, that all the information's there. Of course, the more people involved in contributing to the records, the more independence of the records, and that can only be a good thing for lots of different reasons. But of course, the same with everything. The more that's coming in from the more different sources, then the more independent those records are going to be. So of course, the most important thing that the records will be used for is conservation and nature recovery initiatives. So for these to actually really be targeted and successful, it's important for the people that and the experts of those species that are planning those initiatives really know what is where, because of course they don't want to reintroduce a species in a place where there's an abundance of their natural predator, for example. So these all the information will sort of will be valuable. And so, as I mentioned earlier, and I will make no apologies for keep reminding that it's really important that no matter how you're recording or for what reason, that the records do end up with your local record centre. So then let's look at what species to record. So this is a really easy, literally everything that you see living, every aspect of biodiversity, you can record and should record. So everyday things, rare things, pollinators, birds, mammals, insects, mollusks, trees, flora, everyday things, everything that you see. It's really important as well not to ignore the common species. So some things that the data would be used for is to calculate, for example, the species richness of an area. And if you imagine if a whole section of species haven't been recorded because people are like, oh, they're every day, so I'm not going to bother with those, then they won't, then that will skew any studies that are trying to calculate how many species are in a given area. But also, as I talked about before, who's to say that something's common today may not be common in the future. So, I remember when I was a youngster, red squirrels were everywhere. It was I used to see them all the time, and now where I live in Oxfordshire, I don't see them. And so it's important for lots of reasons that everything, and this also can help as a sort of step into recording, because sometimes the common things are the things that you will know the names of, and you will be able to get yourself used to recording, and then you can progress onto other things. The other thing to mention is to record all instances. So for example, if you see a house sparrow in your garden today, and then next week you see the house sparrow again, don't think, oh well, I recorded that a week ago, because it's important that a picture can be built up of is that sparrow living in the area, or did it just happen to be passing through on that day? So the more data, the more instances that you can record, the more valuable it is for people looking into that species. So what then will you actually do? So along the side of the slide, there's 4 fundamental aspects that make an environmental record, a biological record. It's observation. It's all different terminology, but it means the same thing, your record. So it's important to know who saw it, and that's important because are they an expert or a novice? If there's any questions, that person can be asked and the record queried. So who saw it? What was it? And again, try not to be too put off by what can seem like an overwhelming challenge of trying to work out what things are. It may be that, for example, you may see a bumblebee, you may not know what type of bumblebee it is, but just recording that you saw a bumblebee will still be valuable. Obviously, if you can then learn more about the different species and record a particular species of bumblebee, all the better. But just the basic observation will still be valuable, and you should still take the time to contribute that. Where was it? So a lot of the apps that you can use will actually give you a map where it will generate the GPS for you, but it's important that it's known where it was. So generally the audience that my talk's aimed at is novices, and so an expert will be reviewing your record, and they will be able to know, well, that species, yes, that species would be in that area at that time, or actually no, that species is, I need to ask some more questions going back to the who saw it, or no, that species wouldn't have been in that area at that time, therefore I think it is this. And when was it? So the date that you made the observation. And again, going back to seasonal variations that I talked about earlier, it's important because this will help the expert. They won't just be looking at a photograph that you've been taken, they'll be taking all other aspects of their knowledge of the species that they're verifying into place. So those are the 4 fundamental things that are needed to for a record to be a record, really. So what will you actually do then? So firstly, you're going to be observant about what living species you see around you. So lots of people have different motivations for recording and different things that they're going to be interested in. So there might be, if you're looking to do general recording in your area, then it's important that you record everything and don't just sort of aim for, oh, actually, I think this will be important, because everything will be important. But having said that, if there's a certain species that are important to you and your interest, then just focus on that. So as I talked about earlier, if you're doing a species that you love and you have knowledge of, somebody else might be doing a completely different species, all the records are going to end up in the same place, and it's all going to help to build up the picture. So you will need to take a photo of what you see and accurately record the location and the date so that we can have all of the aspects that are needed. So of course, the clearer that the picture that you provide, the better chance of accurate verification. So try to take some photos, but when you look back, see if you yourself can see the features, or perhaps with a friend, look at each other's pictures, because that does really help you to focus your attention on making sure that somebody else can look at your picture and can see the features that you can. Obviously, different species will have different things, different features that the expert will need to see, and this is something that you will build up your knowledge of over time. So you will need to identify accurately what you've seen, and this can put people off. But there's lots of places that you can get help in identifying a species. So I've put an app up. Obsidentify is one that's quite useful. There's lots of others. Lots of different people use lots of different apps. Obviously, we all kind of use things slightly differently, so we'll all have things that we sort of we prefer over others. It's really important to say that an app should be a tool, but not an absolute determination. So for example, if you are fairly familiar with a species and you're thinking, oh, I just can't remember what this is called, then obviously if you put that through the app and oh yes, of course that's what it is, then that's absolutely fine. But if you're trying to identify something that you don't know at all what it might be, then it's important that you use that app identification as a starting point. Now, Obsidentify is great because it gives you a percentage of how accurate it feels it is, but even sometimes when it's very accurate, it's not giving you the right thing. And that's, of course, because it is AI. Effectively, they all are AI, and they'll all build up more. The more input into them. But so that's not to discredit them. They are a brilliant tool, especially if you don't, you need a starting point to what it may be. But then you need to check maybe in a field guide maybe on a website specific to the species that you're looking at. And also there's lots of social media help, so you'll find people that are experts in a specific species might have an Instagram account where you can look at their pictures. There will be Facebook groups where people can go to help with identification. And although I'm going to talk a lot about using iRecord for actually recording your records, iNaturalist is also very popular. And one of the benefits with that is that you can put something, make a record in there without even knowing at all what it is, and other members of the community can help you. So don't be put off by not knowing. And ultimately, just remember that your record is going to be verified by an expert. So much as it can be overwhelming to not know, I don't know what this is, and it's, I don't want to record it. I don't want to put the wrong data in. The data will only actually go in when it's actually verified by an expert. So if you make a record of all of the information, so the species, the abundance, so if you're going home to determine what the species is, make sure you just make notes as well as the photos of what do you see, what do you see in that species that may help you to identify it when you get home. There's nothing worse than getting home and looking at a field guide or asking an expert, and they say, oh, what was this? What colour was this? Or what was this? Or did this have this on it? And you didn't, you can't remember because you didn't make a record. The abundance, date and location, and depending on what app you use, you may be able to do this as you're going along. So as well as contributing to your local biodiversity records, it can also be very educational. You learn a lot, and it's lots of fun, but it also is very addictive. So you will find it hard to leave your house without seeing and wanting to record what you see. Just an important point on that, leaving the house. So we're talking about things that we see in the wild. So when we're recording, so just a note on that. So for example, if you have plants in your garden, that wouldn't be in the wild. You've planted those, so you wouldn't be expecting to record the plants in your garden, only outside of your garden in the wild. But say, for example, if a bug or a butterfly or a bird flew into your garden, then you still would be recording. You still would be recording that. So it's only really the sort of static things in your garden that you would ignore with the plants. But anything sort of coming in and out of your garden, you would be looking to record those. So where to look then? So I've got this little picture here, and that shows you just literally everywhere. You will find something everywhere. So you've got the pylons. Quite often you can find birds if they're publicly accessible. You might have lichens on the post. You've got the fields and the grasses. You might have flowers in the fields if it's a meadow field. Buildings and roofs. Look up to the sky for the birds. Trees, road signs even may have lichens on. You've got native hedgerows and non-native hedgerows, verges. Even the roads and the curbs, you will find lichens and maybe some bugs. So literally everywhere you will find something to be recording. So how to record then? So there's lots of different ways that you can record. I do personally favour iRecord for the end result and for being able to review the records. I'm going to talk more in a little while between the benefits of specifically iRecord and iNaturalist. But iNaturalist is also very user-friendly place to record. You can record directly with TVERC, which is the record centre covering Oxfordshire. A lot of the other record centres will have ways that you can record direct. as I keep stressing, any level of experience can contribute, regardless of whether you are a complete novice or an expert in the field. All of the records will be verified by experts in the species. And a little plug, if you are an expert in the species and you do have time to volunteer to help with the verification of records, then you should contact iRecord, because that is really, really important. It helps to keep people motivated. If you're getting feedback, it helps the learning, and it helps basically the value of the records that you're getting, which will help to your species that you're an expert in. So you can use a combination of sources, but it's really important to try not to create any duplication in the records. So in order to do that, you need to understand the flow of the data from the records. So for example, if you're using iRecord, so you understand where that data is going to go, in what circumstances it will go to sort of what places, to then understand if you're then contributing to in another way, whether that's going to end up in the same place, because that's going to cause a duplication, which is going to just basically going to add to the record centre's workload. And much as the record centres just basically love data, they're like sponges for data. They want all of your data, but they do work really hard, and they're quite often very small teams working with absolutely mass amounts of data beyond our comprehension. So of course we don't want to add to their workload. We want to keep their time free for actually working with the records. So if you are interested in a specific species, you will find some species specific studies that you can contribute to, and then again you'll find all different levels. So whether you're a novice or you actually know quite a lot about a species up to experts, you will find something that you can contribute to that you in the species that you're interested in. So we've got Hedgehog Street, which is run by the People's Trust for Endangered Species, which is literally mapping any hedgehog sightings. So really sort of like basic, but the value of that data is invaluable. The Bee Walk, run by the Bumblebee Conservation Trust, where you set a route that you walk once a month, and you record and you report back to the Bumblebee Conservation Trust the bees that you see. And again, that is useful or appropriate for all levels of knowledge. They give you lots of training that's available online, so lots of webinars, lots of information that's from previous webinars that have been recorded. So you can just literally record how many bumblebees you see if you're not sure on the species, down to recording them by species. All of the information is useful. So local badger groups will want recordings of badgers. iButterfly, specifically for butterfly, and of course we have the annual butterfly count by the Butterfly Conservation Trust. Ancient Tree Inventory, run by the Woodland Trust, where we can all contribute if we see ancient trees in our area by recording the data, and again that will be verified and added to that inventory that the Woodland Trust are aiming to build up. So this is just a very small snapshot, but basically whatever it is that you have specific interest in, you will undoubtedly be able to find something structured, if that's sort of what you're looking for. But all of these things, they're all records, they're all contributing to the data for your area to know what is present, what in what abundance, and will all help for all of the reasons that we talked about earlier. So on then to how to get help on species identification. So I talked a little bit earlier about apps, and don't rely on them as an absolute definition. Please do check the result with other sources. And again, How deep you want to go into learning to be able to identify the species will just depend on your individual motivation. What are you wanting to do? How much are you wanting to get involved? Are you interested in a specific species, and so do you want to learn more about it, or do you just want to record quite basically the information that you see? So it's not to say that you have to spend lots of time sort of learning. It's important to say as well that there's a lot of educational information available for free. So you don't need to worry that to be able to learn more is going to be really costly. Lots of the sort of local, the national societies and conservation trusts that are specific to species, as well as their local, the local groups as well. A lot of the local groups, and you have national groups, that conservation groups across an area of different species. All of these people will be providing, you can sign up to their newsletters to learn about how you can get involved. They'll do webinars to help you to learn more. The species specific societies and trusts you will find will do webinars that help you to learn more about the species and being able to identify them. So a lot of those, if you're not able to find one that you can actually attend, and which is great because you can ask questions. A lot of them have YouTube channels where you can find the content uploaded at a later date. But also the local record centres themselves, they are always happy to support people. They provide a lot of educational information. If there's a certain thing that you're looking to learn and you can't find the resource, then I would suggest going to the record centre. All the record centres will have county recorders for specific species. Obviously their sort of like time is very tight, so not all of them are willing to be sort of generally contacted, but some of them are. Just ask the record centre and they'll be able to help you. Obviously other recorders, especially like communities like iNaturalist, you can be in contact with other people that you don't know recording the same thing. So we've got books and field guides that you can get, and of course again that can become quite expensive, especially if you're looking at lots of different species, but you can get lots of books and field guides secondhand at car boots and charity shops and online. You may find as you learn more about specific species, a secondhand book may be quite dated, so you may find that you might want the newer version, but certainly for the basics, an old book in my opinion is still helpful, especially if it's the case between not being able to afford to have the newest edition or having a dated. Sometimes sort of names, scientific names of things change, but that's not really problematic when you're doing your record, because the software will likely know the new name. So it's just important if you are using dated books to know that sometimes scientific names change. So professional bodies as well, so the Arboricultural Association, for example, for trees, obviously they're aimed at their professionals, but there's lots of information available on their YouTube channel. Local conservation groups, social media, there's lots of people on Twitter and on Instagram, and lots of Facebook groups for certain species or general recording. The Field Studies Council have lots and lots of field study guides that can help you as well. So they're well worth a look at, and they're fairly inexpensive. So then, so I talked earlier about iRecord or iNaturalist. There are other apps as well, other places that you can upload. So as I mentioned, for me personally, I mostly use iRecord. I do sometimes use iNaturalist if I'm struggling with identification and I want help from the community, although not in a selfish way, because I do regularly take the time to go on iNaturalist and look at other people's records to help other people, and because as well as being able to help other people, which is contributing to the records overall, I find it helpful to focus my mind when I'm taking my photos, because you look at somebody's photo and whether you can see clearly the features that you're looking for. So that is helpful for that. And we've got the QR codes on the screen for iRecord and iNaturalist, which will take you straight to their website. So as I say, you don't need to choose one or the other. Obviously, don't put the same record into both because it's going to cause a duplicate. The reason that I use iRecord is mostly because the records feed into the local record centres, and I can have the direct contact with the verifiers. I find that my records more often verified. iNaturalist does import into iRecord, but then that's an extra step for the data, an extra place for it to become a hurdle. So the important thing is to use what suits you and what you want to do. So if you find that you can't get on with iRecord and you want to use iNaturalist, don't be put off because because of the extra layer of the data. It should be a fun thing for us to enjoy doing. So iRecord, then the benefits of iRecord. So once it's verified by an expert, the records feed into the local record centre, certainly for TVERC. So it's not the same for also Northamptonshire. The record centre, they don't receive the records from iRecord. So if you don't fall within TVERC or Northamptonshire, it's important that you do find out, because you don't want to be making the records, assuming that this is what happens, and then find out that what you think's happening to your records isn't. So with TVERC, once the records are verified, then they will upload once a year in January. So you in iRecord you have direct, the verifier has almost like direct contact. So when they look to verify your record, if they have any queries, then they can, or feedback, then that's going to come straight to you. If it feeds through iNaturalist, that doesn't happen, because it's obviously the record in iRecord is from iNaturalist, not from you individually. There's more information that can be recorded in iRecord. But both of them have an app, so you can do web-based or the app, less information that you can put in on the app. Both have activities or projects that you can set up for other people to join in. So you could set an area, say, we're going to record a certain species, so we're going to record all wildlife on, sort of in this area over the Christmas period, for example, could be your activity, and other people through the app could do that. So you can do that in iRecord and iNaturalist. It enables you in iRecord, you are able to mark certain species sensitive. So some species are automatically considered sensitive. So if, for example, you saw a badger, which is a protected species, and you made the record of the badger, anybody else looking from the public, looking at records, wouldn't be able to see exactly where you saw the badger. It would just only be available to iRecord where that specifically was. It may be that in your local area you may consider other species that aren't nationally protected, but to be considered, you may consider them at risk, and you may want to mark them as sensitive, and that is absolutely fine to do that. So also the records go before the verifier quicker. If they're entered into iRecord, in iNaturalist, they have to get to research grade, and then overnight they're imported into iRecord, so there's a little bit of a delay. Another thing that's not actually on my list, but a lot of the national recording schemes do feed into iRecord, so then it helps to keep all the records in one place. But also if you, so for example, the Ladybird National Recording Scheme is something that I only became aware of through recording ladybirds, and then the verifier had left a note to tell me about it. But even though I didn't know about the National Recording Scheme at that point, for ladybirds, when I put the record into iRecord, because it's the same under the same platform, the recording scheme, the experts were able to use my record. So, and there are lots of different records, especially if you're recording generally across all species, you may not be able to keep up with all of the different schemes. So it does mean that the records can be useful for that as well. So iNaturalist then, so as I mentioned before, once they get to research grade, which means that basically a certain amount of the iNaturalist community have agreed the species. So if I recorded an observation for a house sparrow, for example, then somebody else could look at my record, another member of the community, so not an expert especially. Of course, that member may be an expert, but they may not be. And if they agreed that it was a sparrow, different species have different numbers of people that have to agree. And then say, for example, if it was 3 people, once that many people have agreed, it would go to research grade, and then overnight it would import into iRecord automatically. It's important to understand that some people do have the understanding that once it's research grade, it means that it's been verified. That's not the case. Research grade just means that it's got all of the information that it needs. So we talked earlier about the 4 fundamental aspects. It means that it's that record is good enough to be research grade, but it still needs to be verified by an expert once it gets into iRecord. And every area with different, with the different verifiers in different areas will have obviously different amounts of time and different, sort of different interests. I personally find that when the records have come into iRecord from iNaturalist, there is a drop in the amount of records that are looked at by the verifiers, and for quite understandable reasons. And at the end of the day, the verifiers do so voluntarily. So to my mind, it's in our interest to make our records so that they are appealing for the verifiers to verify. So in iNaturalist, then you do have the benefit of engaging with other members, which can be helpful if you're sort of learning about a species. People, as well as being able to confirm or suggest a species identification, and they can give you more information on that. So that can be really helpful. And I guess it depends how sociable you are, because it can also build up a social aspect. There's lots more visuals on iNaturalist. So when you upload the photo, the AI built in will tell you what it thinks that it may be, so give you some suggestions. There is now, going back to iRecord, when you upload the photo, it does tell you whether it thinks that what percentage it thinks that you are correct. This can be helpful if you miskey a species, or if you sort of mistyped, or if you've got things where you might have the same name for a bird or a moth, for example, and you might have selected the wrong one for if you're using common names. Both iRecord and iNaturalist allow you to enter using the common name or the scientific name. So generally people do find it more user-friendly. So certainly that helps to get more people engaged. So if you are if you are trying to get other people in your area involved in what you're recording, and they're not as dedicated to find out what the species is and then upload it on iRecord, you can find that more people will use it, and you can still look for those records, so you can still make sure that they go to research grade, that they end up where they are. And again, you've got the project function. So just to mention at this point, so as I mentioned, mostly I use iRecord personally, and as you will see, that once the record's verified, it will go to the record centre once a year. Now, what you'll find is, again, the recorders, not all species may have a recorder for a county, especially if a county is small. Of course, there's less people and there's just so many different species. So it may just be that in your area there's nobody to actually review those records. So just because they're not verified doesn't mean that they're wrong, because if your record is wrong and a verifier has looked at it, then they can mark it as incorrect. If you're very lucky and you've made a mistake, they will correct it or tell you what the correct species is, which you should then log back in to upload it. Of course, this is only going to happen in iRecord, because in iNaturalist you won't get any notification of the verification, because iNaturalist is importing into iRecord, and then that's separate from your iNaturalist account. What happens in iRecord stays in iRecord. What happens in iNaturalist does import through. So yeah, so it doesn't mean that because your record's not been reviewed there's anything the matter with it. It probably just means that there's no verifier available in your area. So again, different areas will find different species have somebody able to look at them. So what we do then is we download the records from iRecord every sort of intermittently, and we send them direct to our record centre. So that way that we know that all of the records, and then the record centre have their own means of verifying the records before they actually end up in the official records. So some important things to remember then whilst you're recording, just some things to have in mind, or some sort of points to mention that don't especially fit in anywhere else or everywhere. So keep yourself safe, be aware of your surroundings. If you're going out recording alone, make sure someone knows where you are. Make sure you've got your phone with you, which you probably will do to be able to track your GPS. But just always, bear in mind your safety. Keep yourself safe. Don't venture off publicly accessible land without permission. If you do go on private land that's not publicly accessible and you have permission from the owner, then it's advisable to have that in writing. So obviously, if you are trespassing to obtain records, then then they're going to be useless. So you need to stay on publicly accessible areas, or obtain the landowner's permission if you're going off of the onto private land. So remember biosecurity then, and to disinfect your footwear especially if you're going between different sites. This just means that if there's any diseases or pests in the area that you are, sometimes they're so minute you might not be able to see them, that you won't then transfer those to a new site. So it's really important, something that can quite often be overlooked, to make sure that you keep your footwear and your clothing. Obviously, make sure you've got no bugs on your clothing. Take care what you'll touch, depending on what species that you're recording. Just be aware that some species have some toxicity in them. Fungi, for example, is a prime example. So to be able to record the features, you want to record the top of the fungi, the side of the fungi, and the gills and the stem. So to be able to get that, you may need to touch it. So just make sure that you thoroughly wash your hands after. Make sure that what you're touching isn't going to irritate your skin. Some plants, for example, will cause different degrees of problems to your skin. So don't just go around, sort of touching everything without any thought. It's really important that you don't compromise the actual species that you're recording. So you don't obviously, if you're recording plants, you don't trample all over them and kill them off. That if you're recording a different species, that you don't trample all over the plants. That you don't disturb or cause any stress to any wildlife. So if there's a species that you're looking to record, don't disturb it to get that record. Use a zoom camera. But if it's the balance between getting the accurate record and obviously compromising the species, then of course, and we don't want to compromise any species. And don't guess your identification. So we talked a little bit earlier about bumblebees, for example, on the bumblebee walk. And so my examples here are trees. If you, for example, if you see an oak tree and you think you may know but you don't really know what type of oak tree it is, it's fine to record it as an oak tree. That record will still be valuable. That record of an oak tree will be more valuable than a record of a specific oak tree species that turns out to be incorrect. So it's better to be a higher level than the lower level that turns out to be wrong. So just some things to think about there. So just some apps here. So I talked earlier, so I had the QR code for OBS Identify, but just some other apps. You'll find some general apps that can help you with anything, although you will find that, again, it's AI, so it evolves on the usage. So depending on the species, some species it may be able to recognize better than others. And you will also find apps that are specific to the species. So again, I talked earlier about if you're looking for species specific studies, or you're looking for educational material on the species, if the specific species that you're interested in, or most of the groups will have newsletters you can sign up to. Here are some, not all, just what I could think of off of the top of my head, and you will find that generally speaking that these places will welcome your questions and you're wanting to learn about their species. They obviously, if you have a specific species that you're interested in, then you may wish to join, but a lot of the materials available for non-members, and then obviously hopefully you'll become more interested in the species than you will join. So all of these societies and conservation trusts may also have local groups which you may wish to join as well. You may be able to find out more information, but they're certainly a good starting point if you're looking to learn about a specific species, either to help you with identification, to learn more about that species generally, to find out what research is being carried out into that species, how you can help that species, and as well as finding out about any sort of citizen science projects. I just have on the slides just that this just shows you what when you are recording and I record, what you'll actually see. So you can see it's quite basic. And this is the equivalent on the desktop. So you can see if you want to record more information, you do need to do that on the desktop. Once you record in the app, it uploads and you can see your records and edit your records on the desktop, but not in the app. And then here you can see what it looks like when you record in iNaturalist. So you can see the AI giving you the photo recognition, giving you some sort of prompt, so you can see why it can be more deemed as more user friendly. Although, as we saw earlier, it does provide an extra hurdle for your records to get where you want them to go. So. I think I've covered this already when iNaturalist imports into iRecord. So basically has to have all of the 4 elements of the record that we looked at earlier, including being marked as research grade. So developing relationships, and so a lot of the research that we did into the recording and what happens to the records. And we wanted to follow the flow of the data from when we first inputted it, how we inputted it, and where that ended up, to make sure the records were ending up where where we wanted them to be, and that they would be able to be used by the people that we wanted to be able to use them. So a lot of when we went to the places to ask questions, a lot of the responses included the phrase developing relationships. So that is to say that a lot of the things that should happen are still developing. So don't just presume that you think you know what's going to happen to your data. Just check. So we talked earlier about the National Biodiversity Network and the Atlas, and that is very much a developing project. So if you can imagine, you've got all the record centres all across the UK that have all developed over hundreds of years differently, and they all they all have different functions and different processes. So then sort of amalgamating all that data into a central hub is an absolute massive job. And so of course we should all be patient when things don't quite happen as we would think that they should do, but make sure that we are aware of those things that might not happen, those, and what I was called those like little niggles and those little hurdles in the data. Just have a clear idea of where your data is progressing, and if you are, for example, if you are, for example, interested in helping conservation as a specific, or research into a specific species, make sure that your record's going to end up in a place where that person is able to use it, but ultimately make sure that your records end up with the record centre. So things to think about. So why do you want to be involved in recording? What species are you interested in? What actions will you take following, sort of following this presentation? And what is your key learning? So, of course, it's all well and good thinking, yes, I'm interested in this, sort of like what I want to be involved. But what are you going to do? Are you going to download the app, register an account with iRecord? Are you going to sort of take some time to look at the Record Centre's site? Are you going to visit the website of the National Society or Conservation Trust for a species that interests you to sort of find out about their recording schemes? Sort of just try to think about, sort of steps that you can take, and don't necessarily think, oh, I've got to go and, sort of do this all at once. I just wanted to, when I have your attention, make a quick reference to ecologist reports and local record centres. So obviously for mostly for planning would be the ones that would be publicly accessible. An ecologist may go onto a site to carry out a survey, and they will also ask for the records from the local record centre of what has already been recorded on that site. And one would expect that the ecologist would report back to the record centre in any additional observations they've found. And that actually in practice doesn't very often happen. To my mind, it should be mandatory because, of course, especially in the context of planning, if you've got a developer employing the ecologist, there is some kind of conflict of interest. Although, of course, the ecology and the passion for sort of for the biodiversity obviously should shine through. If it was mandatory that the observations had to be fed back, then that would sort of take that out of them. So if you do come across any ecology reports, just make sure that your record centre are aware of them. So thank you very much, and I hope this has helped.